Shalom. Shalom. Giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya Yisrael of the tribe of Dan of the house of Israel. This particular presentation, we intend for it to not be long, but you know how it may be on this particular channel. So, giving a shout out on a human level to my lady, Sarah Michaela of the tribe of Judah. Giving a shout out to the people who endorse the channel, support the channel, share the videos, like, comment, and share. Definitely is appreciated. What you're hearing in the background is the elders who are now deceased to Don Dawid on his CD. Just want to sit there and play that a little bit before we get started into this particular matter. What we're going to talk about is history. What we're going to talk about is linguistics, as we have been continually doing for the past now 3 weeks before this one. Last night we did a presentation / interview with the brother Mighty Hebrew, and I got some good feedback regarding that. So we want to continue in the same vein regarding this particular matter and doing presentations and letting that history be known to the people. All right? So without any further ado, let us get started in this particular matter. Let me go into and look into the YouTube on my particular end. Brothers and sisters, thank you for that. Shalom, Eric Miller. All right, we're going to get into this presentation. All right, and let us get started on this particular matter. Shalom. Now, as those who do know, brothers and sisters, this is a continuation of where we was doing things last month. Now, there are those who in this world who, without understanding, say, the Egyptian culture itself, want to sit there and state that the Hebrews either borrowed or plagiarized or stole from and so forth and so on the culture of the Egyptians. Now, as been pointed out in the book Egypt Talk and Writing, you will see that somebody independent of Egypt and Israel stated that the Hebrews / the Israelites had a culture that was new to the world. The Torah in the book of Deuteronomy distinctly says that the law of the Israelites is not like any law throughout the entire world. So when you study the Code of Hammurabi, when you study about the matter of the Quran, when you study about the matter, say, of the New Testament, when you study, say, about the matter of the principles of Ma'at, the culture of the Torah is different than any of those kind of matters. All right. Real brief in speaking upon the uniqueness of the Torah, I want to state this in no disrespect. In the Code of Hammurabi, you're not supposed to harbor a runaway slave. Whereas in the Torah, we are told to do so. In the understanding, brothers and sisters, of the New Testament, you're not supposed to swear. Whereas in the Torah, we are told to swear in the name of the Most High. You understand? So in the understanding of, say, in the Quran, it is not forbidden for a man to beat his wife. Whereas in the Torah, such things is not even talked about nor permitted. You understand? So while this is no disrespect intended to other people's cultures, we know good and well that the Torah is not borrowed from another people's culture. All right? So this is something we just want to point out for reference purposes. Shalom, my brother, More Yiftach of the tribe of Dan. One Danite to another, shalom to you. All right? We're going to talk, and you know what that's about, brother. All right? And due respect. Nothing bad, nothing negative. It's about convocations, just in terms of like that. Now, if the priesthood is not the same, the culture is not the same. Let us look at Leviticus 21, verse 1 through 2, and then verse 5. Speak unto the children of Aaron the priests, and say unto them, they shall not make baldness on their heads. So if the priest in ancient Israel that comes from out of the line of Aaron is not supposed to make baldness upon their head, if your priest is your spiritual intercessors, if your priesthood are the people that you will go to for counsel, if your priesthood can actually sit there and grant somebody a pardon or a death sentence, depending upon the situation, you best know good and well that if the priesthood is different between two cultures, then the cultures are not the same. In the Egyptian priesthood, they used to sit there and shave their head bald. The Israelite culture is different than such. All right. So this is just something we want to point out for reference purposes. All right. Now, let us look at Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 29. Cut off the hair and cast it from thee, and take up limitations on high places, for the Most High have rejected the generation of his wrath. So what we just read right there in the book of Jeremiah, it lets us know that the cutting of hair, getting a Caesar of today, a baldy of today, and so forth, was deemed even in the book of Job as a sign of mourning. When a person in the Israelite culture is under the Nazarite matter and their Nazarite vow has been accomplished, they're supposed to shave off all their hair. So we begin to see that a person that's a Nazarite in Hebrew is called Nazir. Nazir means consecrated or separated. In other words, that person that's a Nazarite, don't let a razor come upon his or her head. So neither are they supposed to go to funerals, neither are they supposed to drink alcoholic beverages. There are certain rules that go along with that, which tells us what, brothers and sisters? Drinking yayin or wine was not deemed bad in the culture of Israel. Drunkenness, yes, but you can get drunk almost under anything. You understand? But getting back to the point of the priesthood with the hair matter, the Egyptian priests would cut their hair as you go and you see inside of their walls of Medinet Habu and so forth and so on. Whereas once it came down to the culture of the Israelites, they're not supposed to make baldness upon their head. We already see that the nation of Israel understood that the shaving of one's hair was a sign of sadness, not a sign of cleanliness that the Egyptians thought of. All right, so this is something we want to point out. Next slide. Thank you. From Claudius to Titus in brief. Now, Claudius was one of the Roman emperors, brothers and sisters. All right. Titus was one of the Roman emperors. So now, brothers and sisters, let's look at this for edification purposes. After the matter with Claudius, we see Nero, and he died in 68 AD or CE. But he had sent Vespasian to go against the Israelites who had conquered the lands known as Jotapata, Gamala, and Samaria. Now, all of those lands, brothers and sisters, as we're going to show here, right, with the laser pointer, all right, Jotapata, Gamala, and Samaria, brothers and sisters, all those particular lands right there are north of Jerusalem. Now, those who do know the history and geography of the Israelites, Jerusalem became the capital under the reign of David. After David, you had Solomon. After Solomon, the kingdom split. In the northern kingdom, the original, correct me if I'm wrong, capital was Tirzah. All right. And then it later on became Samaria, brothers and sisters, under the rule of Ahab. Ahab is the husband of Jezebel. Isabel, in the Zidonian language, is named after one of their gods. Isabel in Hebrew means Allen of Fishes. E means Allen. Zebel means manure or fishes. So in the Zidonian language, Jezebel or Isabel meant one thing, and in the Hebraic way, it meant something different. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes linguistically. All right, now getting back into this particular slide right here, it says what, brothers and sisters? He and his son Titus in 69 AD or CE agreed that Titus could stay in Israel while he went back to Rome to try to become emperor. So Vespasian left Titus in Jerusalem. Let's go on. When the timing happened that he took Jerusalem, he did so. And this is recorded in Josephus and Tacitus. All right. So We went over last time, brothers and sisters, the matter that Tacitus spoke upon the Israelites with Titus. We spoke upon that when I did the presentation, brothers and sisters, this so-called Monday or Tuesday, when I was talking about the celebration of the book, Egypt Talking Writing. Let's see, brothers and sisters, what Josephus says in part. Titus, according to some, took Israelites from Israel, the land, to the land of Egypt. Yet no one has shown evidence of such. Josephus in Wars of the Jews, book 6, chapter 9, does not say that he shipped them to Egypt. It says in Josephus, Wars of the Jews, book 7, chapter 5, that the triumph that was left in Egypt was sailed to Italy. According to both Josephus and Lionel Furtwängler in his book, The Jew of Rome, we see that Titus crossed the desert, the Sinai desert. It was not necessary to use ships, though in ancient world times some did. So what is the point in all of this? Statement right here. Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, some people saying when it says the Lord will bring you back to Egypt in ships, or the Lord will cause you to go back to Egypt in ships, right? They're saying that happened during the era of Titus of Rome, but that did not happen then. What people misquote in Josephus is that the people that was already in Egypt, in Alexandria, Egypt, was shipped from Egypt and Northeast Africa to Italy. That is what Josephus says. It doesn't say that Titus took people that was in the land of Israel and shipped them to Egypt. So in the book, Not Playing Salesman on the Shabbat, Deuteronomy 28, 15 to 68, all right, I explain about the Roman historian Munter, M-U-N-T-E-R. I'm going to type that in here. And there's a video on it as well on the channel. All right. Munter is one of the Roman historians that a lot of people who bash Israelites try to quote to say that when we say that Deuteronomy 28:68 is about the Atlantic slave trade and coming over here to the West, that we have lost our minds. That's what they're essentially saying. And so what we're saying is that Munter does not say such. What Munter states is that there were some people that was taken and they never made it to Egypt due to shipwreck. That's why reading is important. Let's go on, brothers and sisters. So I want to sit there, brothers and sisters, and show, if you will, with a highlighter, the matter here, this book here, The Jew of Rome. All right. And looking upon that particular matter, right, The Jew of Rome, Lionel Furtwängler, he stated, brothers and sisters, that Titus went across the desert. So when you find, no disrespect intended, Caucasian or not, people online trying to sit there and say that Titus of Rome would not have gone over the desert because it would have been harder. He just would have took them by sea. That's why it's important to read. That's why it's essential to read. Make your citations to become known. Give the people, respect your audience who respect you. If they give you the time in their ear, let them know where you're getting your info from out of respect. All right, let's go on, if you will, brothers and sisters, to the next part in here. All right, let's look. One thing I want to point out is that the Bible says the matter of Deuteronomy 28:68, after we read the scattering of the plucking and the plucking, they were scattered after being plucked, then worship idols, then did not have assurance of their life, then sent to Egypt in ships. Now, we already done pointed out that this Egypt by ships, brothers and sisters, is talking about a symbolic Egypt, Mizraim. We know good and well, brothers and sisters, the ancient Egyptians, as you see in this picture here, in this statue thing there, they didn't call themselves Egyptians. Israelites called that particular place Mizraim. They had their own name for it. Part of it was called Kemet, which they in English transliteration say Kemet, but in Egyptian it was Kemet, and then some refer to as Deshre, which English transliteration, correct me if I'm wrong, has as Deshret, the red land and the black land. Deshret being the red land, Kemet being the black land. So them coming together with the red and white crown under Mentuhotep in Dynasty 11, they refer to that as the Peset with the red and white crown, the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. Brothers and sisters, they didn't call themselves Mizraim. Brothers and sisters, they had their own name for themselves. So when we go into Deuteronomy 28:68, and it says Mizraim, Mazer meaning distress, and Yah meaning sea. Mazorayim, the distress of the sea. We can see what it's talking about. Let's go on to the next part, brothers and sisters. The Romans speak on the Israelites, part 2. Moses, wishing to secure for the future his authority over the nation, gave them a novel form of worship opposed to all that is practiced by other men. Things sacred with us, brackets, the Romans, with them, brackets, the Jews, have no sanctity, while they, brackets, the Jews, allow with us, brackets, the Romans, is forbidden. They, brackets, the Jews, slay the ram, seemingly in the region of Hamon, and they sacrifice the ox because the Egyptians worship it as a piss. Brothers and sisters, when we read in the book of Exodus, remember the part when Moses said, shall we leave while we sacrificing the abomination of the Egyptians? When Passover comes in, the Egyptians was worshiping the ram and the lamb. That was one of their gods named Kinun inside of the Egyptian pantheon. So around the time when Passover was happening, brothers and sisters, the Egyptians was already worshiping the ram and the lamb. So now when we get into this particular matter, brothers and sisters, we want to show that the Romans were even themselves saying that the culture that Moses gave is according to this what? Novel. Novel means new form of worship. So how in the world are you going to say that the Torah came out of the culture of the Egyptians? Anyone who knows Torah and anyone who knows anything about the culture of the Egyptians with their pantheon of gods, you know good and well, brothers and sisters, that was not the case. The God of Israel, Yah, was not happy when the Israelites incorporated the Canaanite and Egyptian gods and Babylonian and so on and Philistine and Ekronite gods into their culture of the Israelites. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know of any one papyrus or one stela where one God is saying, y'all Egyptians have broken faith with Amun-Re. But you can read in the prophets of Israel where they have broken faith with the Most High. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. This is coming from the book, brothers and sisters, of Cites, the Roman historian. All right? And what great nation is there that has statutes and ordinances so righteous as all this law, which I set before you this day? There is no nation whose law is like that of the Torah. Did you know that ancient Egyptians ate pork? The principles of Ma'at of ancient Egypt doesn't have a diet. I state again, the principles of Ma'at of ancient Egypt does not have a diet. So they was eating anything without any regard. We just read in many camps in Israel, the portion Shemini, which goes over Leviticus 11. It has to chew the cud and has to have split hooves. The sea creatures must have fins and scales. You cannot eat anything that goes on all fours that have paws. So we don't eat cats in the house of Israel. We don't eat the members of the feline family or the canine family in the house of Israel. So we have a particular diet that is different. The Shabbat is not observed inside of the cultures of these other nations. Ancient Israel had a 7-day week. Shabuah means week. The word Shabbat means 7. So from Shabbat, meaning 7, you get Shabuah, meaning week, a 7-day week cycle. All you did was Shin Bet Ayin. You put a Shin Bet Wild Ayin from Shabbat, Shin Bet Ayin. You put a Wild between a Bet and an Ayin. You get Shabuah, which means week, W-E-E-K. The ancient Egyptian had a 10-day week. So the calendar of the Egyptians and the calendar of the Hebrews is different. The culture is different. The priesthood is different. So any of these, and I hate to have to say it, these Masonic orders that want to try to discredit the Hebraic way of life by saying they came up out of Kemet or Egypt, you're sadly mistaken, and you're actually lying on ancient Egypt at the same token. Next slide, please. The diaspora in brief. Now, when I did this PowerPoint, it actually allowed me to change it up a little bit. Now, why did I do this in this particular case and show this particular picture in this? The diaspora in brief, brothers and sisters. What can we say concerning this? If I can be heard, let me get a 1, please. If I can be heard, let me get a 1. Thank you, brothers and sisters. the diaspora of the Israelites is not expected to have been studied. I remember when I was in college, they tried to sit there and say that, well, we don't really know what happened with the people, after 70 AD. We just don't know what happened. Brothers and sisters, what happened with the people after 70 AD is that they kept on fighting the war that had already started in 66 AD. The significance with 70 AD is that is when the temple was destroyed. It doesn't mean that the people were still not fighting. It doesn't mean that the Kittos battle did not happen, brothers and sisters, over 40 or 50 years after that, from Serencia, aka Libya, when they was going up against the army of Nerva and Trajan. So these are things we just want to point out for edification purposes. If you want to know what happened with the diaspora of the Israelites, it does not hurt to read about the Roman Empire and quote the Jews. Let's go on and see what some of the things that we can retrieve from this. As the image I'm showing, let's just try to hide this and just talk about this among our close circle. And that's the point in me putting this picture here. If I can be heard, let me get a 1. If I can be heard, let me get a 1, please. Thank you. Now let's look at this right here, brothers and sisters. Right? We have here, and I want to show this, if we will, with the laser pointer. Afro-Asiatic. Afro-Asiatic. Then it goes down, goes this way, goes down, goes this way, goes down, goes this way. Near East. Semitic goes this way. Akkadian goes this way, goes down, goes this way, goes down. Branch off from Akkadian, Hebrew, and Aramaic. All right. So just want to point that out for reference purposes. All right. All right. So let's look at this right here, that Hebrew is part of the Afro-Asiatic languages. All right. Hebrew is not European. We show this on other videos, but we want to drive the point home that Hebrew is listed alongside the Afro-Asiatic languages. Hebrew is not European. The Hebrew people are not European. Josephus spoke of how the Hebrew language, when spoken, sounded like Aramaic. So, brothers and sisters, this is just something we want to point out for regards within edification purposes, if we will. All right. Let us continue on in this particular matter. I'll just want to share the video real quick with somebody. Thank you so much for that. All right. Let's do that again. Thank you all for the time. Brothers and sisters, it is appreciated. All right. Let's look at this even clearer. Semitic, Akkadian, Hebrew, Aramaic is part of the Semitic, which is part of, in this case, the Afro-Asiatic languages. So with it, brothers and sisters, being the Afro-Asiatic languages, it's not too hard to figure out what we're dealing with. All right, let's go on, if we will. Thank you. Amharic. This person here is part of the Amharic people speaking. Let's go on and see what we can find in this case. Beta Israel, quote Falasha. In 1670, the Portuguese reported that in Ethiopia/Abyssinia, there is a group of people who keep the Old Testament ways. They apparently was an embarrassment to the European Jews. This ties in later. So just want to point this out. And if you look very carefully, these appear to be children, all right, by the mountains of Ethiopia. And where they live in part in Gondar, Ethiopia. All right. So just want to point that out. And not trying to be funny, the females there are shown wearing skirts. Just saying that for, what it is. Okay, now this here is part of the Beta Israel community. We are, in many cases, regardless of many people's calendar, keeping Passover next week. Some people are doing it coming in on the 15th, some on the 17th. Some have already done it. And this is why, no disrespect intended, not to get sidetracked. A brother, even though I go online and I to promote my channel, I really don't go back and forth about the calendar matter. You know what I mean? Because there's been over 20 years of discussing this calendar. Recently, and I don't mean to blow up nobody's spot, I had to try to explain to somebody when I posted on Facebook/Meta, miss me with your calendar. When I'm online, and it's not to be arrogant or harsh or stank or anything of that kind of sort. I promote, not talking business on Shabbat, my books, my lady's book. I sit there and promote the videos. I share other people's content. I'm not there to make LOLs, emojis with a smiley face. That's not what I'm using the internet world for. I'm using it to learn and to teach. To learn, lil mode, and to teach. Lahorot, to do both. All right, not to sit there and get people to be entertained. We had enough entertainment. No disrespect intended. They're trying to not to get sidetracked and entertain black people with this matter of this lady that is going to be or is into the Supreme Court. Brothers and sisters, that's her victory. That's not a victory for us as a people. That's her personal triumph. We have gone nowhere by Clarence Thomas being in there, by this lady being in there, and so forth and so on. And no, I'm not the biggest fan of the presidents, but when Obama was in there, we didn't take advantage what we could and should have in many cases as a people in respect. We complained he didn't do this. We complained he didn't do that. Now, while I am not, quote, an Obama fan because he stood behind passing some laws that against the laws of the Torah, just wanted to point out, brothers and sisters, that no, that's that lady's victory, not us as a people. They're trying to use that as a token, like the Greeks did when they sat there and had a high priest and say, this is somebody that's of your own people. Meanwhile, we still working for one man to pay rent to another man. So getting back into the matter here, this is people from Ethiopia, and they're doing the matter timing of Passover. Right now, what we call as Israelites Pesach, they refer to in Amharic as Fasika. All right, I'm gonna try to spell it in English the best way. Fasika is Amharic for Passover. All right, so let's go on to the next part. And the unleavened bread that they're holding, we call matzah in Hebrew, and Amharic is called kita. Well, so when we call it matzah as unleavened bread, they call it kita. All right, so just want to point that out. Again, I'm asking if I can be heard. Type in the 1, please. Thank you so much. Next slide. Adisu Masala. We thought all the Jews in the world were black. Jerusalem Chronicle 1996. This picture is a picture showing Adisu Masala. He is from the Beta Israel, so-called Falasha community. The picture below such is showing a protest of people who are against the police, or should we say they are protesting the police who are against them. So brothers and sisters, there you see on the bottom there, a sister, a lady, black lady, and some other black people and so behind her that are against the police or protesting the police being against them. So what they going through in the state of Israel was not that far-fetched when, say, a black man is killed in the United States and there's protests. You remember the Sean Bell matter and the protests that went along with that. So may he rest in peace. So we just want to point this out, that our people that are over and that was taken over to the land of Israel, they are not the happiest over in that particular land. All right. And of course, there won't be no peace in the land until the true house of Israel gets there. So we definitely want to point that out for edification purposes. And no, the Falashas are not Hamites. The Hamites call them Falasha, meaning landless, because the Cushites know that the Beta Israel is not Cush. That's why they call them Falasha, which means stranger or outcast. Let's go on to the next part. Ethiopia in the matter with Israel. Now, what we want to show in this particular case here, brothers and sisters, is Sudan shown here, Ethiopia shown here, and Abyssinia shown here. Map of Africa, brothers and sisters. And it says in Zephaniah, as we've been reading, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia shall they bring my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed as my offering. So the dispersed daughter of Israel, and you know it says the daughter of Babylon, it means the people of when it says daughter of. All right, so let's point that out for edification purposes. In Psalms 137, when it speaks about the daughter of Babylon, when it talks about the daughter of Babylon in the book of Isaiah, what it's saying is just as this part here, when it said the daughter of my dispersed, it's talking about the dispersed people of the house of Israel in this case. So the Bible in the book of Zephaniah, which is, brothers and sisters, contemporary with Jeremiah, as we went over last week in the presentation, we are seeing that it says from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia has two main rivers, which today is called the Blue Nile and the White Nile. So looking at it like that, from beyond those rivers, either you're going to go south or you're going to go west. If you keep on going south, there's a people in southern Africa, all right, that are referred to as Limba, Lemba, all right? And when they said that they did a DNA test, that they got the priest gene in them from the house of Aaron. So now let's say that is the case then. How do you have the Aaronites over in the vicinity in the Levant, and then some of their descendants as far going south of where the Bantu people and so forth are? It's because Israel scattered. Now, let's point this out. Bantu land in Western Africa and Central Africa is not the true land of Israel. Jerusalem is truly not in Peru, and it is not in Utah. Israelites been scattered so long throughout Africa and then taken over to the Americas. For centuries after centuries, we believe that the land of Israel is over here. No, it is not. Let's go on to the next part. Thank you. All right, Queen Kahina, a black woman who lived in the 7th century AD, who ruled over the Berbers and is led a war against the Arabs and taken. She is said to be saying she is part of the Berbers or the Jews of North Africa. This is a picture of her online, according to some people. When I looked it up, they showed nothing but other images of looking like the Ptolemy children, the Ottoman Turk children, and I'm like, no. This woman, Queen Kahina, was against the imperialism that was being done in Northern Africa. So we just want to point that out for reference purposes. Next slide. All right. Carthage matter. We're going to keep on, as we're pointing out, talking about this history in the diaspora. All right. Thank you, Eric Miller, for typing in the 1. Thank you. Carthage matter. In the 9th century BCE, the people from Tyre went from there to settle in what is now Tunisia. In the 4th century BCE, it is said they, according to Hanno in the Periplus, went from Carthage to Gambia. So, all right, so you had the people that was in, all right, looking at this map over here, all right, taking it back here, if you will, right? This right here where the Levant is. Tunisia, brothers and sisters, is over here where that is. The Gambia is over here. So now you have people that were of the Hebrews that went from Tyre, where the tribe of Asher and Zebulun primarily dwelt, and went over here to Tunisia, because northern Tunisia is where Carthage is, right? Then it says some centuries later, in what they call the Periplus of Hanno, that they went over here to the Gambia, to Western Africa. So we want to point this out, the migration pattern that we are talking about. Next slide. Thank you so much. The Phoenicians and the African Jews. Let's go in. The word Phoenician is from the Greek word for purple. The Israelites, as known, migrated from the place called Carthage even before Carthage and Rome had war, and settled in what is later called Gambia. We just pointed that out in the Periplus of Hanno. You can actually get that book online. All right. Goes on to say, from the time after settling in Gambia, right, we see the Portuguese setting off the slave trade. When the slave trade occurred, there were people taken from Gambia to the West Indies. From the West Indies, many were taken to the United States. Now, this is no disrespect. I recently talked to a person who was telling me that slavery really wasn't what people were saying it is, because they really was telling it in reverse, and people were really taking from here going east. No, brothers and sisters. The majority of the people in the Atlantic slave trade were taken from the east and was brought west. You can read about it in records such as that of Oluda Equiano, a black man. And for those who need a white man, you can sit there and read about it with Alexander Falconbridge and what he stated in the 18th century. So you have a black man, Gustave Vassa, aka Oluda Equiano, and then for those who need the man, in order for something to be believed, you can read about what the white man, Alexander Falconbridge, stated about that slave trade matter. Okay. These African Jews, as all other Romanized Africans of the area, were caught in a rebellion in Cyrenaica, during 115 CE against the Roman imperialism and colonialism. This rebellion also marked the beginning of mass Jewish migration southward into Sudan, or Western Africa, as it was called, along the way to the city of Air, and into the countries of Fouta Djallon and Senegambia, which lie below the parabolic curve of the Niger River's most northern reaches, where the city of Timbuktu, Mali, presently stands. This is according, brothers and sisters, to, may he rest in peace now, Yosef ben Yochanan, who really didn't like Israelites for all intents and purposes. All right. Yosef ben Yochanan kept his Hebrew name while keeping his teachings on Kemetic stuff. He said in a speech one time that the philosophers, that's his people. I don't know if people heard what he said. Yosef ben Yochanan was part of the community of the philosophers or the Beit Israel. Maybe he saw more prosperity in teaching it Kemetic or Egypt stuff. Not sure. Nonetheless, brothers and sisters, in his book, it says African origins of major Western religions. It talks about the people of the Israelites who migrated. Let's go on, if you will, brothers and sisters. John Oldreby, mentioned by J. Williams. Now, this is Joseph Williams that I'll say. John Oldreby is the picture on the right-hand side for those who need somebody else other than this black dude that's on here every Friday night talking about this. Let's see what some would rather sit there and hear say. And it's not to be insulting when I say that, but we know what it is. Oh, they are trying to make everything black, and they're trying to Africanize everything, and so forth and so on. Let's see what this person said in the 17th century AD or CE. Many Jews are scattered over this region. Some natives, boasting themselves of Abraham's seed, inhabiting both sides of the river Niger. Others are Asian strangers who fled there either from the desolation of Jerusalem by Vespasian or from Judea, wasted and depopulated by the Romans, Persians, Saracens, and Christians, or else such as came out of Europe, whence they were banished, etc. Brothers and sisters, John Oldeby, as you see here in the picture, this is dated to a book that was written, brothers and sisters, in the year 1679. All right. And J. Williams is Joseph Williams who cited it. According to this guy here in this picture, it says that others are Asian strangers who fled there either from the desolation of Jerusalem by Vespasian or from Judea, wasted and depopulated by the Romans. So the Romans' thing was to make sure Israel's memory was to be erased. Hadrian, the Roman, who was actually a Spaniard, the Roman emperor, he actually was the one who said, no, we won't call it Israel, we call it Palestine, to try to hide the memory of Israel from that. But the truth of the Most High dwells forever, as Psalms 117 says. So there was no way that any man could try to just totally obliterate the nation of the Most High, the house of Israel. Let's go on, if we will. All right. From Africa to America discussed. The slave trade in West Africa brought down the great empires that had existed. The slave trade started to go from West Africa, first to Europe, then to West. The first slave ship to go west was in 1518. Though there were blacks enslaved in Hispaniola, aka Dominican Republic and Haiti of today, in 1501, shows that black people existed in the Western Hemisphere prior to coming from West Africa as captives. Now, brothers and sisters, there were, brothers and sisters, black people in the Americas before the Atlantic slave trade. But we know good and well also that the bulk of the people were, without a shadow of a doubt, brought over from Western Africa. Now, brothers and sisters, this quote that you see there, I took out of the book that I wrote called From Assyria to America. All right. And this is just something we wanted to point out for edification purposes. All right. Whom you see in the picture is whom I want to show for reference purposes. If you can see it. All right. We're showing our sources of what we're talking about. All right. Panfilo de Narvaez. And I'm going to type that inside of the chat. The last name, that is, at least. Narvaez. All right. It says that he took black people as slaves the century before any were brought to Virginia to the places now called New Mexico and Florida. New Mexico, brothers and sisters, in Florida, that's where that guy that you see there in the picture took black people as captives. He was the captain of the ship, and this is before the matter of Jamestown, Virginia. Next slide, please. From Africa to America discussed part 2. In 1591, the empire of Sankar fell to the Spaniards and the Moors. The Moors we're speaking of are those who were kicked out from Spain by Isabella and Ferdinand in 1492. Now, as pointed out, Charles V is the grandson of Isabella and Ferdinand. Let's go on. The Spanish were heavily involved in the slave trade. In 1494, we note the Treaty of Tordesillas, in which Spain and Portugal divided the Western Hemisphere for themselves. Now, on this channel, giving a shout out to the brother Zakar that goes to the Camp DCB, I did a presentation with him on this, and we spoke about the Treaty of Tordesillas, so you can look that up on this channel. All right, Mora Yeshaya interviews Zakar, matter of slavery. The natives were enslaved first, then a two-faced gentleman, we're going to keep the language clean, okay, petitioned the king of Spain, Charles V, to have slaves brought from Africa to come west. Now, this gentleman that I was just mentioning is a guy named Bartolome de las Casas. Bartolome de las Casas was a Spaniard that went to the king of Spain, Charles V, and he got what we're going to get into, a thing called the asiento, which was a wicked, though legal don't mean righteous, all right, matter in order to sit there and take people from Western Africa to the Western Hemisphere as captives. All right. Bartolome de las Casas, he wrote a book about the destruction of the Indies and what happened when the Spaniards came and brought syphilis, smallpox, rats. Did you know that there were no rats and rodents like that in the Western Hemisphere till the European colonizers came? It's not native to the Western Hemisphere. Every rat that you see roaming around in New York in the train tracks is a descendant of the rats that was brought here by the Spaniards. So we just want to point that out for reference purposes. All right. Or from the other Europeans, i.e. the British and so on. All right. In 1529, Spain and Portugal made the Treaty of Zaragoza, in which it was sanctioned by John III of Portugal and Charles V. The Asiento too in time came into play. All those treaties and sanctions were Spain's mental justification to enslave others. You know, Spain doesn't deny that history. Portugal tried to hide the records, but France and Spain don't hide the history that they was involved in the slave trade. And for what it's worth, neither did Bill Clinton, neither did George Bush. All right, let's go on to the next part. Gambia to Virginia by West Indies. Reynolds, in his book Stand the Storm, stated that the distance from Gambia to the West Indies is 3,200 miles. Cowley, in his book Black Cargo, stated that Basel Negroes were brought from the West Indies to Virginia. Basel Negroes were they that were owned by the Spaniards. Did you know that Jamaica was owned by the Spaniards before the British? Did you know that Trinidad was owned by the Spanish before the British? The word Trinidad is a Spanish word meaning Trinity. Did you know that Barbados, before it became under the British yoke, it was ruled by the Portuguese? Because the word Barbados means beard in Portuguese. So these are just things when we want to get into and what we're talking about. To surmise, we're talking about the scattering tribes of Israel that went in part to Carthage, from Carthage to Gambia, and then from there brought over to the West Indies, from the West Indies to Virginia. Most of us in the North got family in the South. Let's go on, if we will. All right, next part. Now, this is what I was talking about. Charles V and Bartolome de las Casas. All right, Charles V is the guy that you see here. All right, and Bartolome de las Casas and his two-faced self trying to say, let's go get the Negroes out of Africa because we done sat and killed all the indigenous over here. Is shown there. Now, let's look at this right here, brothers and sisters. All right. Oh, sorry. Yes, I did want to show that. Let's look at this here, the slave trade map. This says from 1650 to 1860. 1860. You ever heard of the Clotilde ship in Africa Town and today known as in the land of Alabama? Research these things. These things is not made up. Did you know, brothers and sisters, of the Zong? And this one here is kind of sad in this particular matter. Zong. This was in 1781. One of the slave ships that was intended to go to Jamaica ran out of food and so forth and so on, and they dumped everybody that was on there into the ocean. We do not want to minimize what happened with us as a people. Yeah, we know that we came through slavery and not from slavery. It was just part of our history. But we already see, just like no disrespect intended, when someone can just comfortably say, oh, well, slavery really wasn't what it was. Meanwhile, your last name is Wilson. Meanwhile, your last name is Johnson. Meanwhile, your last name is Hutchinson. You understand? How did we get these names? How did we get these surnames while some of us are saying, well, as far as I go back, we don't remember slavery. Your slave name is your last name. That is how you can be able to tell. It's not hard to figure out. Next slide, please. All right, we already showed these guys. Next part. Notes. Blacks brought to Cuba in 1506. In 1516, Charles II issued licenses regarding blacks as slaves. The Asiento from 1543 until 1834 is what was used to have blacks brought to the West Indies as slaves. The Portuguese in the 17th century had the Chaqueco If I mispronounce it, please don't hesitate to correct me. I don't speak Portuguese. Slavery company. Brothers and sisters, in the 17th century, that means it's the 1600s, the Dutch had the Dutch West India Company. In the 1630s, which is the 17th century, it was common for Dutch to take over Portuguese ships. We spoke about the Maroons of Jamaica last week. There was also Maroons in Brazil, as we spoke about, say, 2-3 weeks ago. When the Dutch and the Portuguese was fighting in the middle, brothers and sisters, of the 17th century, that's when many became Maroons and fought against their oppressors. Slave trade aspect. Davidson. The Spanish. They could not get enough Spaniard slaves. Where were they to look? The answer was West Africa. Already the Portuguese and Spanish had imported a few West African captives in their own countries. So, brothers and sisters, the Portuguese, like Henry the Navigator's friend, Anton Goncalves, reached the Guinea coast in 1441 and returned with slaves. So from 1445 to 1455, there were people brought to slaves or brought into slavery from Western Africa to places like Lisbon and Portugal. So we don't want to minimalize and act like that kind of thing did not happen. All right, Davison and Cantor. All right, Cantor wrote a book called Encyclopedia of the Middle Ages. All right, and Davison is Basil Davison, who wrote a book called History of West Africa. So I just want to cite my sources in this. Let's go on to the next part, if we will. Notes. In 1625, the Dutchman Johan de Willem received a license to operate in the West Indies, Brazil, Virginia, and Guinea. In 1626, the French traded in slaves and other stuff such as ivory and gum. In 1619, we see about the Dutchmen of War bringing 20 blacks as slaves to Jamestown, Virginia. This was not the first time blacks were enslaved in what is now the United States. We're not going to allow the minimalists to just sit there and say, oh, it was just a treaty. And if you look at your birth certificate, you can sit there and get funds. Brothers and sisters, no. We're not doing that. You don't sit there and play sellout and just try to minimize the oppression that your people and your ancestors went through and continue to go through. Don't think so? Ask the Israelites who was in a hospital when a woman gave birth of the house of Israel. And they tried to say, why do you want to name your child a Hebrew name? What's wrong with Tiffany? What's wrong with Monique? And I'm related to sisters with those names. So I'm not trying to be disrespectful or anything of that sort. All right. So let's go on, if we will, to the next part, please. If we will, right? The matter with the Dutch. Blacks were taken to Brazil by the Dutch in 1621. Blacks were taken to Manhattan by the Dutch in 1646. William Bosman, shown right, stated that he had acquired captives from Dahomey land. Brothers and sisters, William Bosman's citation, I got that from a book called The Slave Trade by Hugh Thomas. So you may want to sit there and check these things out. Next slide, please. Thank you. Ezekiel 36 in the Khazar and the tribe of Dan. Getting it back. The presentation was brought to you in love. There will be other presentations, we pray. We hope you all understood, enjoyed, and shared this presentation. We also ask you all to like the video if you care to do so. Also, we ask you all to subscribe to the channel. May we all have a great and beautiful new year and a healthy one as well. Shalom. Now, the Falashas are said by many to be of the tribe of Dan. And who we see underneath them at the Welling Wall there, brothers and sisters, that wasn't even built by the orchestration of an Israelite. That's part of the Herodian temple of Herod when Edom was having rule, when Rome was over the house of Israel. So there in the Roman time with Herod, who was a friend with Augustus and so forth, right? And Antipater was friends with Julius Caesar. You understand? Looking at it like that, I pointed that out in the Egypt Talk and Writing book. I broke the timeline down about how Rome and Edom were friends. We already know in Israel you are what your father is. Sometimes people try to say because the Dead Sea Scrolls says that Rome was Edom, the Edomites were aligned with the Romans, but the Romans themselves come from Japhet. The Edomites aligned themselves with the Japhetic nations. The Israelites migrated in many parts into African nations. The Edomites, making a league with the Romans, aligned themselves and went up into Europe. And thus you see the people that you see there on the bottom. Those people are not the true house of Israel. This is no disrespect. They know this to be the case themselves. Let's go on, if we will. Ezekiel 36 says this. Thus saith the Lord God, because the enemy has said against you, aha, even the ancient high places are ours in possession. Therefore, ye mountains of Israel, hear the word of Yah Elohim. Thus saith Yah Elohim to the mountains, and to the hills, and to the streams, and to the valleys, and to the desolate wastes, and to the cities that are forsaken, which are become a prey and derision to the residue of the nations that are round about. Edom, Ishmael, or part of those nations that was round about, Moab and Ammon. When the Israelites, by the time Ezekiel came along the scene, he was a captive in Babylon when Jehoiakim king of Judah was already taken captive. So when we look at this, it says the land that was desolate and left for the nations that are round about. The Most High through Ezekiel took it to the land, and it says this, thus saith the Lord God, therefore, surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the nations, and against all Edom, that have appointed my land unto themselves, for a possession, with the joy of all their heart, and with disdain of soul, to cast it out for a prey. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, I have filled up my hand, surely the nations that are round about you, they shall bear their shame. Brothers and sisters, when I stood up in the United Nations in the 1950s or in the 1940s, Gabal Nasir, correct me if I'm wrong on his name, he said in the UN, you won't have peace because you left black and came back white. When me and my lady Sarai was in Egypt, yes, the Arabs there run the airport, run the government there and everything else. But the pictures that they have of the Egyptians of old are black people. The Arabs that are in Egypt do not sit there and show themselves as being part of the Ramses and the Amenophids and so forth. The Europeans try to sit there and say it, but the Arabs, unlike Japhet or Edom or whoever is trying to hide their identity by mixing and mixing and mixing and mixing, that's why it says the residue of the nations that are round about, they shall bear their shame. This prophecy has not come to pass yet, but it will, like the others. Let's go on to the next slide, if you will, and close this out. This was painted, and this is called Israel in Egypt, by a guy named Joyner, Joyner. He painted this. We see everyone, even the looking at captives, with their afro, if you will, and brown skin, which today we would say, oh, these people are black. When me and my lady was in Egypt, we saw the Giza pyramid. The book of Joshua, for those who do quote it, it says, the Israelite babies were put into the pyramids when the Pharaoh gave the order to slay the Hebrew males. When me and my lady was in Egypt, one of the things I respect the tour guide in telling us is what we were looking at was a big grave site. With that being the case, giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the creator and the maker of heaven and earth. Thus ends this presentation. Thank you to the people who have come on the line. Thank you to Eric Miller. Thank you to Shomrei Habrit. And brothers and sisters, thank you to everybody else who was in the chat and who like to please share it. Let me know what you think. I can be reached as you see my number there, 908-587-4841. And with that, brothers and sisters, we are going to go back, if we will, play a little bit of music for those who can hear that. And we're going to close out. Shalom.
I was out there in the wilderness, on the streets of Babylon. People rushing, doing wicked things. Made me wish that I was home. The king of Babylon sits upon his throne, trying to make us all his food. Always tempting to do unrighteousness. You want to make us break our rules. I really wonder, will I see you in the last moment once again? Wisdom, wisdom. Will I see you in the last moment once again? Wisdom. God gave us wisdom, and that's without a doubt. When He taught us all His law, people rushing, doing foolish now. Now it seems that we are lost. I love your wisdom. Hope to stay with me. Hold me in your arms so tight. With all your might. And as the truth will get you that for sure. Hold on to wisdom, that's your life. Oh, will I see you in that moment? In that moment, what see you in that moment once again. Wisdom, wisdom.
Shalom, brothers and sisters. Most High bless you all. Subscribe to the channel. I'm asking. Let me know what you think in the comments. Peace.